hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator.
All right, welcome back to the next episode of BC Law's Just Law podcast. I'm Tom Blakely. We're joined today by BC Law alumni Courtney Pillsbury, as well as FBI agent and recruiter. We're talking about careers at the FBI today and what you should know if you're interested. So, Courtney, thanks for coming out. Really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So before we get into anything, just tell me about BC Law. I understand you're an alum. You're just coming back to the campus today. What was that experience like?
I have to say I'm probably in the very small minority of students that on graduation day said that if somebody paid my tuition, I'd do it all over again.
Okay.
It was hard, very rigorous, but I loved it. Mm-hmm. I took a couple of years off in between college and law school, so I think I attribute that to being able to come into law school a little bit fresher with an understanding of what the day-to-day grind is like when you're actually working and comparing that to academics. So I really liked it. Was very involved in the oral advocacy competitions, so that was also another fantastic experience for me.
Awesome. Now, did you know, like that? Because I know like a lot of students that come into law school and they have like some idea of what law is like or maybe what they want to do. But did you know like FBI was the route, or were you not sure? Like, how did you start going in that direction?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Growing up, I had always been interested in investigations. Mm-hmm. I would read books like Encyclopedia Brown, and there was a TV show. It was called The Bloodhound Gang. It was on after Sesame Street.
All right. And it's quite a transition from Sesame Street to investigations.
It was like, neighborhood kids solving, neighborhood crimes.
That's
so
cute.
Very kind of Encyclopedia Brownish. So I really liked that stuff. And then when I went to college, I went to Boston College as well, and started studying sociology. And that was obviously sociology is under the umbrella of sociology is criminology. Right. And that's what really piqued my interest. I did an internship in my sophomore year, the summer between my sophomore and junior year, with a probation department. Okay. And that's where I really credit that to kind of forming the path that I thought I was going to take. I really liked the intersection between like social work and criminal justice that probation officers played. Mm-hmm. And
so this is an undergrad at this point?
This was an undergrad. Okay. But in talking with the probation officers, I found out that most probation officers in Massachusetts had to have some sort of an advanced degree. Okay. Just graduating from college, you couldn't get a job. Right. So I said, well, if I'm going to get an advanced degree, let's go law route, not master's in business, not master's in social work. And so that's where I started thinking, okay, I'm going to take a couple years off after college, see if I can, work for a little bit and then apply to law school, thinking that was going to make me a little bit more competitive getting into law school. And that's really where law school came in. Yeah. Where the FBI came in was after my first year of law school. Okay. I got to do an internship with the FBI down in headquarters. Wow.
Now, how did that get on? So you do your 1L year, 1L, you're doing all the same courses. We're in the trenches, and I can remember playing the 1L Jets. A little bit different. It's competitive. You're just new to all of this. How did FBI get on your radar after 1L?
Yeah, they did. They came to campus early in the year, so it was kind of, I think it was like September.
Oh, wow. So right when you started law school. Yeah,
they did an information session. Cool.
Yeah, sure.
And I applied. And I think like most people who apply to the FBI, almost every step of the way you think, I'm not going to get it, right? You make it to the next step and you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to make it to the next step. Right. And so it happened. I got an interview and I started processing my background investigation. And I think I want to say sometime in February or March, I was essentially told that I had the position and that come summer I would be interning down at headquarters in Washington, D.C.
Now, at that point in time, I'm just curious, you have the honors program now over the summer. How different was it then than now? Like, did you get to pick that you wanted to go to headquarters? Was there an option to be like in Boston, or how did it work then?
Again, a really good question because it's a lot of what I talk to interns about or intern applicants about now. Back then, every field office, we have 56 field offices, every field office got to choose 2 people from their area of responsibility. So for Boston, it was Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Maine. took applicants and got to choose 2 people, and everybody went down to headquarters. They either went to headquarters proper in Washington, D.C., or they went down to the laboratory at Quantico, Virginia. So it was a huge group of over 100 interns from across the country that all descended on Washington, D.C. for the summer. It made it a very different process than it is now.
I can imagine. Yeah. Now, going as a law student, because I can imagine that you get people from different disciplines. Like if you're going in a lab, you've got some sort of STEM background.
Right.
If you're going as a law student, how is that experience maybe a little bit different from people with other degrees, education, et cetera?
Yeah, I think they did a really good job of trying to match you with your specialty. So myself and another law student, we worked in the general counsel's office. So we both worked in the employment law unit, representing the FBI when sued by employees or processing employee claims. Other people who had STEM backgrounds, they definitely were more focused on going maybe down to the lab and being able to use their biology skills or their chemistry skills. But generally, the interns that came in, they were history majors, they were English majors, and not yet quite specialized. So they were placed almost anywhere. I had a friend and a roommate who was at the Office of Congressional and Public Affairs. So she helped actually set up the FBI experience, like the museum, which was part of the public affairs piece. Yeah. So it was really, and it still is today, the way I like to think about the internship is it's just an introduction to the organization. It's just a way for you to really get a taste of what the organization is like, the people are like. It's not necessarily to get you these lifelong amazing skills. Right. It's a very short summer. It's meant to be a recruiting opportunity for you to see a little bit about the organization. Got
it. Now, so I guess I would ask between the FBI as things were then and how things are now, you've obviously spent a career at the FBI. What's changed? I mean, I know that's a broad question, but I mean, I can imagine starting then and doing what you're doing then is a little bit of a different experience from students today. It's something of a different world, I would think.
I think like anything, so I came in about 16 years ago, it's technology. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I am not joking that when I came in, we were working on like a DOS-type computer system. Our time cards were all handwritten time cards. And, as kind of time went on, different computer systems became, obsolete and were, upgraded. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. We got a flip phone. That was what was issued to us.
It was a big invention. That came out
back in 2006. I would say that's probably the biggest change, and something that everybody laments. Like, well, back in my day, I never thought that I would do that, but I do it.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's a lot of good that has come about, from those changes as well.
So going from being, an intern to eventually becoming an agent, what was that process like? Did you need, years of experience? Like, were there different? Did you just go from the program to being an agent? Like, what was the process like to do that?
So like I said, it was after my first year of law school, right? So I still had 2 years left. But even then, the minimum requirements were very different than what they are now. I was told by the recruiter that I still needed, after law school, I still needed 2 years of professional work experience. So I at least knew that upon graduation, I wasn't going to be eligible to apply. And maybe even if I was minimally eligible, I wasn't going to necessarily be competitive. So I knew going into my second and third year, I was going to have to find some sort of employment. And I clerked for the Superior Court in Massachusetts for a short time after graduation. It was a very unique situation because 9/11 hit our first month into the clerkship, and you had the dot-com crash. So budgets were being cut everywhere. So our class of Superior Court clerks, we were told by the Chief Justice, we were brought in one day, it was probably in November or December, we were brought in and, as a class and said, we can either lay off a quarter of you right now, or you can all work for 75% of your pay and be released from your one-year contract to go seek employment. So we all decided as a class that we were going to, obviously keep everybody on board, work for the decreased pay, and then as people found jobs, they left.
So they turned it over to you guys, like the class of clerks, to decide.
They basically,
do you want to vote a quarter of the people off the island?
I mean, I don't even know how they would have done that. You know, I think, we were all in different courts, right? Some were in Cambridge, some were in Suffolk, some were, at the courts all around Massachusetts. So I don't even know how they would have done that. Had we not come back with, like, let's just all stay on for until. And some clerks stayed the full year, while some of us then found other jobs and left midway through.
And so during that time, there's obviously so much going on in the country, and obviously in your career, you're just getting started. Were you still thinking like, I'm just doing this to get back to the FBI, or do you start like thinking about like, should I do other things? Like, what was it seems like a busy time to be trying to figure this all out.
Yeah, I knew I still had quite a bit of time before I was going to be a competitive applicant for the FBI special agent position. So I just started digging in and started applying. I mean, this was back when you applied, literally you looked up you went to career services and you looked at every law firm. I knew that my likelihood, I thought all the big firms had already hired, and that was a class. My class was actually one of the classes where graduates were hired and then not actually hired. They were hired after their second year.
So you went to like the summer program, but then when the economy went down, they canceled it. Wow.
Yeah, so there were a lot of us out there looking for jobs. So I kind of set my sights not only for just kind of the cultural reasons. I was looking at small and medium-sized firms. And I was using every contact that I had. I had been a paralegal for 2 years in between college and law school. During law school, I had done some kind of law clerk work for a law firm. And so I was doing everything I could, but I was also working at Bertucci's. And
we love Bertucci's.
Yes. And that is how I got my next job. I was waiting on an attorney who I had worked for. He was there having dinner with a client. And I updated him on what was happening. I was like, I graduated, I passed the bar, I got married. And I said to him literally, I said, hey, if you need any help, let me know. And he said, call me on Monday.
Amazing.
And I started like 2 weeks later.
That's amazing. Yeah, we do so many of these podcasts, and we talk to different folks. We talk to, about going to law school and networking and all these things. And that's something that's always a common theme. I always tell this to students, like just, you never stop networking. Like so many roles come about, sort of like in your example, like in ways you would have never imagined or anticipated. And so, in today's day and age, of course, you've got LinkedIn and everybody's Zooming and all this stuff that was probably different at the time. But yeah, no, there are only good things, I think, come from that, because you never know who's going to be the person that opens the door or makes the connection, and you just always have to stay at that.
It's human contacts. It's contacts, it's relationships. I mean, that will serve you for your entire life, whether it's trying to get into college, trying to get your kids into a preschool, trying to get a job, whatever it is. I mean, those human relationships are absolutely critical. So
Okay, so you get the work experience, and now you're a more competitive applicant for the FBI. So now we're going back to the FBI. So what was it like at this point?
So I had a really good couple of years at the law firm that I joined. Probably some of the most fascinating work that I've ever done, even now considering I'm in the FBI.
And what kind of work was it?
So I represented hundreds of victims of clergy sexual abuse in the Archdiocese case. And it was heart-wrenching. It was challenging. It was so rewarding. I have made lifelong friends with the attorneys that I worked with. I still have clients that are friends of mine. But to be a part of that and a part of what I consider to be a lot of healing that was needed. And I was raised Catholic, so it was not easy for me to kind of confront all that we were learning in working that case. But the 2 years were great, and I don't think I gave the FBI a thought in the 2 years. I was given a ton of responsibility by the senior attorneys. I was doing stuff that none of my peers were doing in their jobs. I had tremendous mentors. But that ended. We negotiated a settlement. We went through hundreds of arbitrations where awards were granted to each of the survivors. And I then was assigned to work securities fraud. An area that I was very unfamiliar with.
At the firm or at the FBI?
At the firm. but it was also representing the securities firms.
Okay, so it's a departure from what you were doing before.
Yeah. And I could not wrap my head around it.
Right.
I couldn't wrap my head around wanting to do it, being motivated to do it, understanding what our obligations were. It was just, there was a blockage there after having spent so much time working for what we would all consider, the little guy. Right. And it was then when I applied to the FBI. So it was like a 3-month period that I was assigned to do that work. And I said, this is not for me.
Sure.
So I put my application in, and that kind of started the wheels moving. I was very fortunate because I then was transferred to work another case, which was very fulfilling for the last 2 years at the law firm. My application took about 2 years from beginning to end.
Wow. Okay.
For a number of reasons, one of which was the relocation policy, which is a hard thing for a lot of folks to get over when they apply. But as a special agent, you sign a mobility agreement, and that agreement says that you'll move anywhere that the FBI wants you to and needs you to. And at the time I was married, I had a husband who I'm still married to the same guy. But at the time we were settled here. He had a great job. We had friends and family.
It's hard to think about moving.
Yeah, it was a really hard thing. So I put my application on hold for a little while until we could kind of figure out if this was going to be the right thing.
And if I could just pause, you mentioned some of the work you were doing. I mean, that's such a substantial topic, particularly in Boston, and thinking about that point in history. What was, and it's hard to put the right words to it because some of these things there's just no words for it, but I guess the Boston legal community, the atmosphere, so this point it's like 2002, like what was it like to be a lawyer in Boston then working on something that is, I think, the most preeminent case in the region, in the country, in many cases the world at that point in time?
It was a lot for a young lawyer,
right?
But I am so grateful that I was surrounded by experienced, wonderful, mature lawyers that were able to help me. And I credit them. They gave me responsibilities that I never would have gotten anywhere else, and they trusted me. And I think them trusting me gave me confidence to do the work. I loved working with the clients. I had the day-to-day contact with the clients, a little bit of courtroom experience. Most of that was done by the senior lawyers. But I was also on TV and like local cable news, talking on panels about like the effects of this on people. And I really enjoyed the discussion of kind of the constitutional law issues and the issues of charitable immunity and like learning these like big, hefty kind of legal topics and digging into those. But I will say, I look back and I am so grateful for the opportunity that I was given, almost just by chance. But it was people that trusted me. I did have, I had history with them. I'd worked with them as a paralegal and then a little bit in law school. But had they not said, like, look, I want to give you this. I want to see what you can do. Who knows what? I could have been doing document review in a warehouse somewhere. But I was very, very fortunate.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about like the entry-level attorney experience. So much of it is, like you said, move these papers from here to there, to take the Oxford commas out of this. But to be working on that right out of the gate is significant.
Yeah. I mean, and we were working really hand-in-hand with the Boston Globe and the Spotlight team because they were approaching a lot of things from the First Amendment perspective and trying to get access to records from that perspective. We were approaching it from trying to get them through records through the civil action and representing the survivors. Ultimately, it was, I think, a combination of both, but very much so like the Spotlight team on First Amendment grounds getting access and being able to really open up something that was so secret and so hidden for so long. But no, I mean, the experience was amazing. It was, every day, right? You're watching it on TV every single day. You're reading about it in the news every single day for 2 years, if not more.
Now, do you think that experience at all reinforced your interest? You talked about, representing the little guy. I can imagine there's a passion, a sense of purpose that comes with doing that type of work. Did that relate at all to, okay, I want to go to the FBI? Like, is that theme of wanting to be, I guess, on the right side of a lot of these issues, did that carry through, or did you just always know you were going to go back to that nonetheless? Or, were you just, I guess, fortunate that was your first job? Like, how did it connect for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it necessarily made me think more about, the FBI. I am a very firm believer that the criminal justice system, when it works, it's got strong advocates on both sides. So I really admire. I have close friends who work, do public defense work, and I think I admire that as much as I respect and admire the prosecutors. So I think having that mindset makes me a good special agent, because I'm able to see the humanity in people and the things that bring people to commit crimes and not automatically, label them. And so I'm grateful that I have that.
Right.
But no, I mean, I think I always wanted to pursue justice and to make sure that people who couldn't speak for themselves and advocate for themselves felt like they had somebody to do that. And that's I think what brings a lot of meaning to the work that we do in the FBI.
Sure. Okay, so fast forwarding a little bit, you had your application on pause. You have the relocation policy. You're trying to think things through. How did the wheels start to turn with that?
So husband came around and he's like, it was the best gift he could have ever given me. Like one day he just came to me. He says, "All right, I'm in." He's like, "Let's just look at this as an adventure."
All right.
Because we didn't know where we were going.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know. You just know you're not staying home. And so I remember calling up a woman at the FBI in Boston who still works there, who I work with daily. Yeah. She was my processing admin specialist, and told her, "Okay, I'm ready to get started again." And she's like, "Okay, can you come out for the physical fitness test next week?" Yeah. And I was like, okay. Yeah. And that's what got the wheels starting again.
Okay. That's a rough way to start. Like, all right, we're going to come. Now, I guess, like, so I was, obviously we came to know each other because I was a part of the program last summer. And I remember the physical fitness test. It was like, I think like 95 every day last summer. Yeah. And that was, I hope it wasn't that hot then, but was it the same test, like the mile and a half?
Yes.
Okay.
It was the same test. I remember we did it at the track over at Harvard.
Okay.
And I remember it being very warm. I don't remember. I want to say it was maybe September, but September can still be warm here.
It's still summer.
Yeah. I do remember that. We did it really early in the morning, though. We would do it like 6 or 7 in the morning.
Had you been training before you did this? Okay. So it wasn't just hey, we're doing it and you've been...
No.
Okay.
No, as soon as I started the process, I was training really regularly, and I knew what the test was. But interestingly, I didn't tell anybody other than my husband. Yeah. And the guy that was training me, those were the 2 people that knew I had applied. I just kept it really close to the vest, just, for a lot of reasons. Like, you don't ever want to have to tell somebody that you failed, that you didn't get chosen or whatever. Yeah. So, so my trainer, and I trained in a group. It was like an outdoor boot camp type thing. So everybody was training me, but he would come up and whisper behind me, "It's going to hurt a lot more when you fail that PT test."
No, there's now thinking back to when I did, so there's like the mile and a half, there's like the 300 meters, there's the sit-ups, and there's the push-ups, right? Yeah. Now, was there an event in particular that you were like, you felt confident about, and one you like weren't sure about, or like how were you feeling about it?
Oh yeah, so you go sit-ups, 300-meter sprint, push-ups, and the mile and a half, and the runs were always the hardest events for me. Right. But the 300-meter in particular, because I would give myself the test as a practice with a friend of mine on a regular basis, and I was always on the cusp on the sprint. Yep. Always. Some days I'd pass it, some days I wouldn't. And I remember the day of the test, I remember running it, and I just remember like bending over and breathing heavy, and I just looked, I'm like, did I pass? And I had gotten the points that I needed at least for that event. I knew my sit-ups and my push-ups, I could bang those out and get some good points there, right? Because it's a cumulative test. You have to score 12 points cumulatively. So you could have a weak event and score maybe 1 or 2 points in that week event as long as the other events made up for it. Awesome. So yeah, that was the sprint was the one. It still is. We still have to do it. We still have to do it.
I want to ask, do they check in to see if you're staying in shape, or is it just
annually? Right. So annually, about 5 or 6 years ago, they reinstituted the annual onboard test. Okay. So annually, we have to do it. The one difference is, unlike the test for the applicants, once you're on board, they do vary the scoring for your age. Okay. So if as you get older,
you don't have to like keep up with.
As you get older, the passing scores are are different.
Yeah, sure. No, I remember when we came out to do it. It was like, I was like, okay, push-ups I'm fine, sit-ups I'm fine, sprints okay. That mile and a half, I was like, that's gonna be, and ultimately that's what tripped me up. But it definitely can be more challenging than it seems. So you have to train for all of that. Yeah. Okay, so now you pass your physical. physical. You're coming on board. What was it like out of the gate? Was it you were liking it?
I did. My first field office was Los Angeles.
Okay.
So about week 7, when you're down at the academy, you find out your field office assignment. We call it orders night.
Yep.
And everybody gets up in front of the class and opens their envelope, and then you go put a pin in the map where
it's
you're
like Survivor
going.
Almost,
or like I think from what I heard, like from medical school, where you're where you're placing. And Los Angeles was ranked number 6 on my list, so not bad. And my husband had family in San Diego, so we knew that was going to get us out to his side of the family for a while. And yeah, it was. I liked it. I came in with a group of agents, either my class or a class ahead of me or a class behind me. So there was a good group of us, brand new to the Los Angeles field office, and a group of us all were in particular working a specific area. Okay. So we saw each other every day. Yeah. I really enjoyed my experience in Los Angeles. There was something really special about living really close to the beach and having the sunshine. Coming from the Northeast, having sunshine and warm weather all year round. It was a completely different experience. Okay. But it's a big field office, and we cover a lot of geography. Okay. And traffic is bad, like the planning that you had to do. Yeah. If you had to be a certain place, you really had to be
should leave now.
Yeah. That was always the answer. Let's leave now.
For sure. Okay. Now, how did you come to be a recruiter and get involved in that aspect of the operation?
Yeah. So I was in Los Angeles for about 8.5 years working counterintelligence matters. Okay. And I got back to Boston because I had developed a specialty in counterintelligence, and Boston was looking for that. So they had posted. So I got back to the Boston field office in 2015. Okay. Continued working counterintelligence, and then COVID hit. Yep. Things really slowed down. Okay. A lot of our national security work is in partnership with other federal agencies, with cleared defense contractors, with private sector folks. And so as they shut down and their employees weren't coming to work, our work dried up a little bit. Yeah. And my cases were there was one case that was at the end, there was another case that was at the very beginning, and it just happened to be a really good time. Yeah. The position became open, and so I gave it some thought. I had done some work in that area as a collateral duty. I was working as part of the application process. I was doing meet and greets, and I was a phase 2 assessor. Okay. So those are 2 different pieces of the application process. So I was meeting applicants, and I found it really rewarding to meet applicants, to talk to them about the FBI, to help them build their resume. The phase 2 interview assessor position is one where you do the panel interview for applicants. Mm-hmm. So having had a little bit of that experience, I said, I think I'd like to give the recruiter and applicant coordinator position a try. Okay. And most people that take on that position think of it as, I want to be part of bringing in the next generation. Yeah. I want to be part of ushering in the agents that are going to replace me and carry on my cases, and that's really a big part of it for me.
I want to ask about that too. Having had a career now for some time at the FBI, what is in terms of applicants, in terms of you talk about the next generation, like what is to the extent there is one, a difference maybe between the generations, people then versus young people like myself coming into these roles now or applying? Like, is there anything you notice over time that's become different with the people who are applying?
So I've been doing this specifically for just under 2 years. It'll be 2 years in January. And so I don't have, I can compare it to the people that were coming in with me. Mm-hmm. It was, I think a little bit different. You had people who were former military, local police officers, lawyers, accountants, things like that. That was generally what was making up our classes. Now we have opened it up to anybody with any kind of background, as long as you meet the minimum requirements for work experience. So we have educators and we have physical scientists, and obviously now computer science is a huge thing. Yep. It was kind of a little bit in its infancy, really, when I was coming in, 16 years ago. But So that's, it's really very, very diverse with respect to the professional backgrounds. And that's what I think makes us really good at what we do, because you could be working on a squad. You have somebody with a little bit of legal experience. You have somebody who has the finance experience that can show you how to read, financial records and bank records and understand, that part of your case. You have a computer scientist who can help you understand a little bit of the, the cyber aspect of it. Maybe you have a psychology, someone who majored in psychology, and they're able to give you so you have all of those things together, and I think that makes a really strong organization.
Sure. Jumping off of that, for students out there who are maybe interested in the future of the FBI, what kind of careers are available? Like, what are the pathways? Like, how does it? You just mentioned how people can be on a team and come from diverse backgrounds, but like what kinds of careers and career paths are available? Yeah,
I would say there is a place for everybody in the FBI if that's something that you are interested in. The majority of our workforce are special agents. And I don't even want to say majority because I don't know the exact numbers, but I will say that that's who we hire. The majority are special agents because we are continually hiring them. We have a mandatory retirement age of 57. So people are constantly retiring just by simply having a birthday. And so our special agent position is always open for applications. We have everything from car mechanics to language specialists, forensic accountants. We have lawyers who strictly do legal work for us. We have photographers. We have physical scientists, many of whom work down in the lab. We have electronics technicians. We have computer scientists. So it's really extremely, broad as far as the specialties and that we hire. Each of them just go through a little bit of a different process. I focus mostly on the special agent process. It's the most rigorous. It's the most time-consuming and lengthiest, but it's also the one that we're continually hiring.
Sure. For one of the roles you mentioned, for law students, people who are interested in roles as lawyers, what can you tell me about those roles? I mean, I remember from my time, it's a little bit more specialized. Those paths can be a little bit narrower. Can you just talk about that?
Yeah. So the lawyer positions or attorney positions primarily are at headquarters. That is where you would be working at the general counsel's office, right? And so we have a litigation law unit, we have employment law unit, we have a national security law unit and cyber unit, and they are the lawyers that aid the field in doing their jobs. So all of those positions are in the DC, the Metro DC area, and they're posted on FBIJobs.gov. They're not. It's not like you'll go every day and see something, but as there's turnover, you will see postings. So it's one of those things that if you are interested in doing that kind of work, like check, weekly. To see if there's a new attorney post. I would say for people who are interested in that, work experience is absolutely critical. We're not hiring people right out of law school for that position. So working in other government agencies, working as a prosecutor, mostly for like the federal government would probably be ideal, but even if you came from local or state government and working as a prosecutor or a state's attorney, that kind of experience would be important. If you're working administrative law somewhere, that could also be very helpful in kind of your credentialing for yourself.
And what about folks coming from firms who've worked maybe different areas of litigation or corporate law? Are there paths for them too, or are we primarily looking for like people who are maybe like AUSAs or ADAs or things like that?
Yeah, it's not all prosecutors. I mean, we would definitely, I would say, prosecutors or defense attorneys are going to be extremely valuable just coming from government and understanding the criminal justice system. But no, I think if you're working in the private sector and you're working representing clients before, like I said, administrative law judges, or you're working types of civil litigation that may, a lot of civil litigation is kind of not partnered with, but for example, one of the civil litigation cases that I had at the firm resulted from a criminal case,
and you like parallel proceedings.
Yeah, a parallel proceeding or something that once the criminal case resolves. So I would say just getting, good, solid litigation experience would be key to being competitive for those positions.
And what about within, you mentioned 56 field offices. Are there, from my experience, there's some lawyers that are, playing a role there. It seems like most of the lawyers are at the general counsel's office, but, there can also be lawyers who, work in field offices. Can you talk about that at all?
There are. And right now, my understanding is that all of the lawyers who are in the Chief Division Counsel's office for each field office has a CDC, a Chief Division Counsel, and then under that CDC you have ADCs, Assistant Division Counsels.
Okay.
All of them are agents.
Okay.
So they're agents that came in with a legal background and have decided at some point in their career that they would like to, now move into more of an administrative role.
Okay.
They're still special agents, but they can take all that special agent experience that they've developed over the years and bring that into an advising capacity for other special agents.
So when you're ranking field offices in maybe areas, is that something that you indicate, or is that after you've been a special agent for a while, you can maybe transition to the more administrative legal side? How do you slot into those roles? Yeah,
most people don't, aren't going to take a position like mine as applicant coordinator or recruiter unless they've got, 10 or more years. Okay. Same thing with an ADC, an assistant division counsel position. CDC is something that's even higher. That's the lawyer for the field office. So you've got to have significant casework and case experience before you would look at something like that. Because most agents come in because they want to do the field work, they want to do the casework.
Sure.
And there's not a lot that say, after 5 years, I want to move over to the admin side.
So it's more about that they're, I guess, self-selection. People, it sounds like, would rather be doing casework than some of those roles.
Yeah, I would say in the beginning for sure.
Okay.
In the beginning for sure. And sometimes there's just a good opportunity but for myself, I have to retire in about 9 years. Okay. But I'm not done. I want to go back and work cases.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting to kind of think about my next steps.
Sure.
This was a great thing for me to take on at this time in my life. I've got a young son. It allowed me some flexibility. But I also was excited and enthusiastic about the job itself, about bringing people into the FBI. So it was a good time for me. But I'd like to get back to working cases myself.
Sure. Sounds exciting. So I wanted to ask, if you're a student, you're a law student, you're out there and you're thinking about, work for the FBI, when you're still in school, what should you be thinking about at this point in time? You have to, it sounds like, have some post-grad experience. There's some other things that just procedurally, but just generally, what are some things you should be thinking about if you're, at the very beginning of this whole journey?
Yeah. So we have some automatic disqualifiers that no matter what won't allow you to work for us. So really becoming familiar with our drug policy and knowing what's going to be an automatic disqualifier or what potentially is going to make you have to wait to apply. In summary, marijuana use is still illegal under federal law. So our marijuana policy is that you can't use marijuana or any marijuana products within 1 year of applying. Any other hard drug, it's 10 years. So, you think of that. If you've experimented a little bit in college, you gotta kind of start, keeping track of the time and seeing, where it is before you apply. So the drug policy is one of the big ones.
Okay. Is that just what trips the most people up?
It's the thing that prevents a lot of people from applying when they want to and they're ready. Because I get a lot of people who've applied and we go over their drug use and I'm like, okay, you got 6 more months to wait. You got to withdraw. Or you're not eligible to apply until 2025. So, because of your drug use. So that's one thing that is important to keep in mind. Other things that are automatic disqualifiers would be something like defaulting on student loans. And engaging any kind of prostitution. So it's part of the application process to disclose that, which brings up the other thing that we look for in our applicants, and that's integrity. One of the things I like to tell people is that we are not looking for perfect people. We understand that mistakes are made when we're young, that there's experimentation. I'm not looking for the perfect person. I'm looking for the perfectly honest person, the person who can say, I did this, I've learned from it, I've moved on. It's not a part of my life. That's kind of what I'm looking for, the growth that I'm looking for. And I will say that's why our average special agent going to the academy is 30. The average age is 31.
31, wow.
So you've you've had time to mature.
Right.
Maybe you've had 1, 2, or 3 different professional jobs. You've been in the workforce. You understand what it's like to work with difficult supervisors under difficult circumstances. You understand what it's like to have made a mistake and own up to it, and how that's so much better than making a mistake and trying to bury it, right? Okay. So those are the types of things. Core values. FBI's core values are really important to us. As far as our character, and then FBI's core competencies. Mm-hmm. Okay, we have 8 core competencies: leadership, collaboration, interpersonal skills, oral communication in general. And that's just a few of them. But those are the things that we're asking for. So when you're getting your work experience, make sure you're getting experience that speaks to those. The ability to work with others across differing views, the ability to communicate both verbally and in writing, collaboration, working with difficult people, working with people from different agencies, different organizations, right? So if you're a prosecutor, that's about talking about how you work with defense counsel to come up with, something that serves everybody's purpose. Right. Or, you're in civil litigation, you're mediating, you're negotiating, things like that. So that's kind of like, we have our eligibility requirements, right, that can sometimes be hard to get around. Mm-hmm. And then we have our kind of professional characteristics, and then our more kind of suitability characteristics, which is our core values.
Awesome. Now you talk about values. There's a few questions left. I want to ask a little about culture. You said you worked in Los Angeles, and you're obviously familiar with Boston. Do you find a different culture in different field offices? I mean, you're obviously in different parts of the country, and West Coast, East Coast. I mean, there's just so many differences there. Is there a difference between offices and culture and things like that, or is it just sort of the uniform no matter where you're working, or what was your experience like with that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, Boston is made up of, yes, we have a lot of people that were born and raised here and eventually, got right. back here. And a lot of our professional support staff were from here. Yep. But as far as agents, every field office has agents from all around the country, yep. right? Because that's where they get assigned. And a lot of them, find it to be home, and they, make their home in their community there, and they stay. So, I'm sure, I've heard, like, the difference between Los Angeles and Boston, I don't think it was that, that different size-wise. Los Angeles was a lot bigger. Right. So you had that to kind of contend with. But, I mean, I heard, like, if you go to Honolulu, everybody's wearing Hawaiian shirts. That's just like their professional dress. Yeah. So maybe that adds a little bit to a different culture. Okay. Whereas you're going into, you go to New York and everybody's in their business suits. Right. But, no, I mean, I think a lot of it is kind of top down, right? It's who's running the division, and their priorities, and are they really focused on morale and keeping morale high and doing community events, and so I mean, I think universally, I'm sure every office has their little quirks, but
sure, yeah. Just finishing up, what would you say has been is the most challenging part of working at the FBI?
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people will say right off the bat technology, which is kind of strange because, our technology works when we really need it to work, like on the stuff that we really need it to work on. But like our computers, we always, there's a kind of a joke, the FBI gets, yesterday's technology tomorrow. Okay. But that being said, we do the work despite that, so it's, I'm not saying that that's the biggest challenge. I mean, I think I sometimes find it challenging when I can't share, the work that I'm doing with loved ones, or when there's misinformation, publicly, and you can't correct it. There's and I think that's, that can sometimes be challenging, but it's super important to just know every day that, you're going to work and you're doing the right thing. And, when you go to work, everybody around you is in the same boat. None of them are out there,
they can relate.
They can all relate. So you have that kind of camaraderie and that understanding that everybody's, in the same boat and dealing with kind of the same things. Yeah. So that might be one of the, more challenging challenging aspects of the job. Whereas everybody else can go home and kind of talk to their spouse and download for the day,
Right,
or their neighbors, at the barbecue, they can talk about their work woes.
Right.
It's not so easy for us.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine. And I guess my last question, conversely, what is the most rewarding part of working at the FBI?
I love interacting with the public.
Okay.
Whether that is doing something like this or going to my local high school and teaching a forensics class, or just even, you're executing a search warrant and you're going in there and, there's people behind all of that, right? There's somebody that lives there that maybe did nothing wrong. They're the spouse, they're the child, they're the mother of the person maybe you just arrested. Well, being, I think, somebody that can try and relate to that person. I love interacting with the community in all those different ways, and being somebody that, there's a lot of people that go through their entire lives and will never meet an FBI agent. And I think it's really important. We go back to relationships. It's really important that if I'm the only person that they ever meet, I want that to be a really positive interaction to the extent possible, right? When you're searching through somebody's house, it's a pretty negative experience. But to the extent possible, I want it to be the most positive interaction I can.
Great. Awesome. Courtney, thanks for coming to talk to us today. This has been BC Law's Just Law Podcast. I'm Tom Blakely. Again, we're talking to Courtney Pillsbury, FBI agent, BC Law alum, and recruiter. Thank you again. This was a great conversation. Great. And until next time, that'll do it. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.